This is the Clutch Pick Sports Betting Podcast under the umbrella of the ClutchPoints Network. My name is Sheldon Alexander. We're back. It's week 1 of the NFL season. I'm fired up. You're fired up. Football is almost here. It almost seems like it never left. It always seems like it takes so long to come back around. But we are here to break down the picks for week 1 of the NFL season. And if you have been with us, rocking with us year in, year out, you know I'm joined by my guy, Mr. Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window, available on Substack and via podcast. Mr. Matt Russell, how are you? We're within hours. I'm counting down the hours till kickoff on a new season. Because I got to tell you, I hate preseason everything. So now that we're here, now I'm fired up. How are you doing, my dude?
I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm like that nervous excitement, right? Like everybody's doing the first day of school thing. I should say everybody. People are doing some weird stuff in some weird places. But most people, I guess, or at least people local to here, have just done the first day of school thing. Like this feels first day of schooly, right? Like I'm just excited. Like I know what we're getting ourselves into, but like also it's a long haul, but it will feel like a short haul. Like the whole thing is just, boggling the mind. It's probably the easiest podcast we'll do all season long, and I'll explain that in a little bit, because finding the bets are actually kind of easy. Winning them isn't necessarily easy, but we'll get into all of that as we talk about these games. But yeah, man, just nervous excitement over here. I'm fired up.
Yes. And of course, as mentioned, check out Matt at the Substack for sure. As mentioned, mrusauthentic.substack.com, all that fun stuff, all the whole grain goodness you've been used to getting from Matt. Make sure you get it there. And of course, we'll be here Thursdays giving you each and every single pick to an NFL game that you could ever want. I'm a little fired up. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not apologizing for that. Yeah. It's week 1 of the NFL season.
So do people know that you pick every game? You pick every... I forgot about that for a second. I don't know why, because I know we talk about every game, but I just remembered, I'm like, this guy picks every single game and like tracks his record for it. Like, you're an absolute lunatic for doing this year in and year out. I'm sure that's what you're probably just going to get to, but for some reason, it just reoccurred to me that like, that's what we do here. So I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No,
you're out of control.
You are correct. The folks who might be new here to what we do on the pod, I'm going to give you a pick for every single game. We're going to break down every single game. And then Matt comes in with the information and education on where the line was, where it is, and where it could be going heading into kickoff. And then the hope is that I come out on the other end with a more informed pick. I play the role of the viewer. Sometimes Matt convinces me to change my pick. And then other times I foolishly don't listen. But that's the joke. That's the show. That's the bit. If you're here with us each and every week. And I got to say this. I say it from the beginning, right? The goal is to win more than I lose. Obviously, we want to be profitable. I mean, those rocking with us know that we've definitely been profitable in discussing the picks on the pod each and every year. So, hey, why would this year be any different? I say, what better time to start than right now? We're starting with a rematch of last year's playoff, quote unquote, upset, in which the Chiefs beat the Ravens in the AFC Championship game. We got the Baltimore Ravens at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs at home and 3-point favorites. I'm riding with the Chiefs here, which is not going to be a surprise to anyone who's ever watched this podcast year in and year out, as odds makers mostly always have me rocking with the Chiefs. Just a team I like to bet on. I like trusting in QB play. I like trusting in the infrastructure of coaching. I ride for my guy Spags no matter what. But we're talking about Lamar and company looking for a revenge game. I'm not going to lie to you. At 3 points, KC's at home. That has me okay with taking KC. If it was more than 3, which I know that it was, we might talk about that a little bit here. I might be a little less likely to be on KC, but at 3 points, I'm here for that. Also, the reminder that KC played this game in terms of the first game of the season last year as well, and it didn't go so well. So I feel like that might be a little more added motivation for them in case they need it anymore. I know that's not really how football and betting works, but that's why I talk about that stuff because they're trying to add into different levels of what we're doing here. But either way, I'm on KC -3. Mr. Matt Russell, what say you, my friend?
So there's so many core tenets in this game as far as like handicapping and analyzing the market and all of that stuff. It's actually a really fun game from that perspective, even if it doesn't necessarily have us land on one side or the other in like a very sort of strong way. So key tenet number one right off the bat is line shopping, right? So you've got Kansas City -3. I should say the control room's got Kansas City -3 up on the board. But this game has toggled between -3 and -2.5. And I don't mean it's flipped back and forth where you could get -1 on either side. And so when I was talking about this being the easiest week to do a podcast, I mean because, and we'll get to more better examples here in a bit. I mean that because you spend the whole summer looking at these lines, right? Which way they've gone from early on. This line has not moved, right? I mean, it's moved, but not in any sort of significant way. Where it's moved is it's kind of gone like percentage points from a betting perspective, from a pricing perspective, from -3 to -2.5. So we essentially call this -2.75. So you can get Kansas City -2.5 right now at -114 at Pinnacle and some other places, but you pay either way. You're paying -120, right? If you like Baltimore +3, you're paying -120. If you like Kansas City -2.5, you're paying -120. So the thing is, this line hasn't moved, so it's stuck in that range, right? Where like some books will put on their sort of main page or whatever, +3 -120. Others will put -2.5 -120. So those are different odds, but those are essentially the same price and the same bet. As for some of the other key tenets, one of them, the last time the Ravens played football was against the Chiefs. They, as you mentioned, they were a favorite, and they were actually a pretty significant favorite. They were -4. They closed -4 in that game, which you take a 2-point home field advantage, which is honestly on the higher side nowadays. But I would give 2 for Baltimore, and I would give 2 for Kansas City. You take that down, and Baltimore is essentially a 2-point favorite on a neutral field last season. How much has changed between then and now to make Kansas City a -2.75 favorite? Or if you take the home field advantage away, making them -0.75. Now you could say, Matt, like they won the game last year. That shows that Kansas City is the better team. And I would totally listen to that argument, right? It's played on the field. Like it makes a ton of sense. I would, if I was sort of play devil's advocate in that, I would say the Ravens outgained the Chiefs that day. They had better yards per play that day, and they lost the turnover battle 3-0 to the Chiefs and still only lost by 7 points, right? And is that something that's replicable if, they played a 7-game series, right? Are the Ravens going to lose that turnover battle 3-0? Is a John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson team going to lose that turnover battle 3-0 every time, right? It's probably not. So if this game was played literally a week after the AFC Championship, if they had to do a redo, the line would come down a little bit, but I don't know that it would move all the way to the point where the Chiefs are considered the better team. Who knows after the betting market sort of got their chance to kind of beat it up. So this line opened -2.5 to -3 in this exact same range. So bettors all summer long have not known what to do. My projections based off of season win totals and those markets that have also been beat up all summer long is -2.7. Like this is like the perfect line right now, right? If you want the side that you want at the price that you want to get it, you have to pay a little bit more, right? So there's no -110 bet out there. So you might as well switch that over to Kansas City -2.5, because I am with you in this, right? And it'd be different if the theoretical value on the Ravens meant that they were a pick 'em at home, right? Where we're like, okay, like this adjustment, like, I'm not really sure about it, but all they need to do is win the game at home, which again, they didn't do last time around. Or if, like last year, as you mentioned, that Thursday night football game, like the Lions, the Lions they opened -6. And, I think sometimes people may forget that Chris Jones and Travis Kelce were out for that game where the Lions won by 1 point. 2 pretty important guys on both sides of the ball that got back in the lineup. I think it was the very next week for both of them. So if it was like that and it was like, well, the Chiefs can win by 3 and Baltimore still wins the bet, I would like Baltimore there potentially. But what do we know about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? Like they just win the game. And that the value here and the idea that like maybe this line should be -1 or -1.5, and it's -2.5. Like a lot of close games get settled up on 3, right? It's a key number in the NFL. So the Chiefs can win this game by 3 points in overtime at the last second. Baltimore could be the better team. There could be value on Baltimore, but where the sort of numbers, edge out here at 2.7 tells me like, yeah, like I just want the Chiefs to win this game. Like I want to bet them to win this game, right? And so that's where I'm at with this. I'm going to pay that little extra price. Like I said, price shop for -2.5 with the Chiefs. Make sure that that's a win for you if this game does land on 3. Because the on the field stuff, I'm not, I've got some concerns. I have more concerns about Baltimore since that last game. And obviously losing their defensive coordinator, Mike Macdonald, not ideal, right? He got a season best out of the artist formerly known as Justin Matabuke. He is now Nnamdi Matabuke. Kyle Van Noy, like second in the team in sacks, or second, of the guys returning, because by the way, they also lost Jadeveon Clowney. But second on the team in sacks, Kyle Van Noy was like going from team to team. He was basically on the scrap heap at 33 years old, right? So McDonald, outside of 1 year with Michigan, literally John Harbaugh's brother, he like put him on loan like he was a soccer player. Outside of 1 year there, he's been with the Ravens the entire, basically last decade. And his replacement is Zach Orr, who's 32 years old, also been with the Ravens the entire time. But like, imagine your first time play calling in a real NFL game is doing so defensively against Patrick Mahomes. It's like that's not a great spot for my guy to kind of to come in here, right? So the talent on the Ravens might have dipped a little bit. The secondary is still sweet, but again, the secondary has to deal with Patrick Mahomes, who always, or shouldn't say always, but most of the time makes the correct play. And I also don't love, the more that I think about it, I don't love the Derrick Henry fit with the Ravens. It doesn't really make sense. He's not a shotgun running back, and Lamar Jackson is a shotgun quarterback. And so, like, are they going to give Derrick Henry 30 carries a game, right? Because Derrick Henry gets better the longer the game goes on, the more carries that he gets. And if you're the defense, aren't you just exhaling every time Lamar Jackson just turns and hands the ball, or just sort of leans over and hands the ball to Derrick Henry, who's not running downhill in the system that Lamar Jackson wants to be in, which is a shotgun primary system? And so I just look at this and I go, that's why the win total for the Ravens has been consistently bet down throughout this season. And that's why in many books, as we talked about last week, the Bengals have caught up to them as far as co-favorites. Like, it's not all Bengals love necessarily. Sometimes it's a little bit of dislike, if you will, for the Ravens. So I'm with you here, man. I like Kansas City -2.5. We're going to shop for the best number, the best price. Like I said, -114 the last I looked over at Pinnacle. That is perfectly fine with me. Anything up to -120. -20 is that sort of number where I only kind of pay that price to get on or off a key number. And in this case, 3, I think, is the keyest number, because we know a lot of the times the Chiefs just do enough to win. And this game, relative to last year's game against the upstart NFC team, again, like Travis Kelce, I'm going to take this game off. Not that he wasn't injured, but like, he was back relatively quickly after. And of course, Chris Jones with the holdout. And you see all these guys holding out, that they get that deal done. Your 49ers, since last week, have 2 guys who have come back into the fold. Guys get back in if they're serious about that first game. And last year, Chris Jones was like, "Nah, man, I'm going to be up in the stands for this game." Remember, he was literally up in a luxury box, I think, for that game. And that's not what this game is. This is the Ravens. This could decide down the road, in theory, if the Ravens are better than the market is sort of projecting. This could decide whether the playoff game is back in Baltimore or a playoff game is in Kansas City, right? Whereas last year's game against Detroit didn't have the same high stakes. And so you get Andy Reid with preparation in a big game, all hands on deck, everybody's healthy, everybody's good to go. And yeah, man, I like Kansas City in this game. And I know we're starting off with like the squarest of picks here, but listen, there's enough quote unquote sharp money in the marketplace that's going to like the Baltimore side at +3. And by the way, they might end up pushing that game and be no worse for wear. So no, Kansas City -2.5. Might as well start with your guy, Patrick Mahomes, and your guy Spags.
The other thing I like from the Chiefs angle is I'm pretty sure there's no Kadarius Toney. who, if you remember last year's first game of the season, he had some moments, we'll say. Yeah. He had some moments for the Chiefs
and
game one last year.
Since you brought it up, a quick plague. That's plague would be a bad start to the season. We already did that a few years ago. A quick plug for the Substack. I have relating to that Kadarius Toney release. I have a massive long shot touchdown play coming out in the Substack a little later on. Actually, it should be out by now. For this game. So a little teaser on that one.
That, my friends, in the biz is what we call a tease. As we move on to the second game, I'm on the Chiefs, which again, people will know that and see that and continue to believe that. But
grade that minus 2.5. Grade that minus 2.5, buddy. Grade it minus 2.5.
Yes.
I don't want this record to be tainted by you not line shopping. And the same goes for this next game too, depending on what you said. I'm sorry, I'll let you go. We'll get to it.
Oh no, I'm
so excited. I'm so excited.
No, I'm writing it in. I'm writing it into the notes. I'm banking it into the notes so people are hearing it, so they hear it loud and clear on the pod. So then when we're bookkeeping next week, the people that follow us know.
The people love the bookkeeping. They're lunatics.
Listen, man. If there's one thing, I try to be honest, right? We try to be honest. Well, I was going to say something else, but you know what? I'm not going to put energy into
and it's worth mentioning.
May or may not do.
the people know. I'll keep you in check the other way. I'll keep you in check
for sure.
The other way.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it.
Obviously. We're going to Brazil for the second game here, and it's on Friday. Two things that are just like we're perfectly sums up where the NFL is right now. Just doing whatever the bleep they want. We're in Brazil and the game is on Friday. We got the Packers at the Eagles in Brazil. Again, Eagles favored by 3 points in this game. And this is a tough one for me because I like both teams. Obviously it's neutral site, but there's a whole lot of weird talk about teams, certain players talking about how we're not allowed to go anywhere. They've told us not to go anywhere, kind of stick to the hotel, a lot of like weird things.
Yeah.
And when we talk a lot about the London games, we talk about the travel and the impact and how one team might be better suited to handle that than the other. There's also just things that we just don't know what will go on there. So that's a huge flag for me, in which normally would have me taking said points. But a lot of our preseason talk was about the Eagles and, really like where the Eagles are at in terms of trying to sort out a lot of the drama that they had last season. But even with that drama last season, we know the Eagles start season strong, right? How they finish is a whole other story, as we found out the last 2 years, but we know they start strong. New coordinators on both sides, all of that. I'm comfortable. This is much like the last game in terms of laying the 3 points and living with the push if we come to it, but just trusting in the Eagles more than more than what I'm willing to give the Packers at this point. That's what I'm at. Think that QB will throw for more than 300 yards? How about that receiver in Miami grabbing a touchdown? Check out DraftKings Pick 6. The newest way to compete against others and play fantasy football to win cash with DraftKings. Pick a player and choose if they'll have more or less of a specific stat, like yards, touchdowns, catches, and more. Get your picks right, and you'll win cash. Download the new DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code CLUTCH. That's code CLUTCH for new customers to play $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits guaranteed. Plus, 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Offer expires September 19th. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. One per new customer. Reward issued as $50 in non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 6 months. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus premium terms at NFL.com/terms. You know when you discover a new binge-worthy show or a song that you bump on repeat and you have to share it with your friends so that they can experience just how awesome it is? That's kind of what it feels like when you discover that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. That's such an awesome deal. There's no way you can keep it to yourself. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you and your squad with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. So say bye to your overpriced wireless plan and make the switch to Mint Mobile. Best part is, you don't have to start from scratch after switching. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Ditch overpriced wireless and skip the hassle with Mint Mobile's deal. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/clutch. That's mintmobile.com/clutch. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/clutch. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Slower speeds above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Give me the Eagles -3 here.
Yeah, this is a prime example. And again, well, 2 prime examples. One, another prime example, line shot. My guy, it's 2.5 in a lot of places. Let's get that changed. I want you graded. If you had said Green Bay +3, I would have said the same thing. I'd say, my guy, you got to do +2.5. We're not doing that out here. And you know that. The listeners know it and all that good stuff. Prime example of, hey, if you've been talking about a team and that team having more success than the market thinks all season long, week 1, just bet that team, right? And that's the case for me with the Eagles here, right? So it's like, it would be really weird if I was like, yeah, like Eagles, like potential Super Bowl, like all that stuff. Give me +2.5 with the Packers on week 1, right? Like that just doesn't make any sense. That being said, I do have this number projected a little bit lower. Like I have it Philly -1.2. It opened Philly -1. So at that time, it made a lot of sense that, the line is what it is. But maybe it's people of my ilk and whatnot that like Philadelphia so much that we're betting this up. It did touch 3, which is maybe why you have Philadelphia -3 sort of, on the brain, because it was 3 early this week. And I think at that point, because it's a key number and a little bit different than the Kansas City-Baltimore one, where this line goes up, it hits 3, and then there's buyback. Now, that buyback could come from people who are burying themselves in Philadelphia -1 tickets, right? Because you can just, -1 till you're blue in the face and then come in on Green Bay +3. And then now you've got yourself a chance at a pretty significant middle, given how key a number of 3 is. So that might be the buyback. It might not be just like the idea that people like the Packers in the market. But again, +3 is a key number, and people like taking +3 in the NFL. I like taking +3 in the NFL. So, but it is widely available -2.5. I'm looking at Bet365 right now, and they've got -2.5, -110 on either side. So this is, for me, just I don't love the value. Honestly, similar to Baltimore, Kansas City, though, where it's like, if I just need Philadelphia to essentially win and I'm only laying -2.5, like, yes, they could win by 1 or 2, and then I'd be really kicking myself. And honestly, it's probably why I'm not making this like a big time bet. I'm not making this. I don't think I'm going to make this a contest pick necessarily when it's time to make those selections. It just is sort of like okay, man, you've been talking about the Eagles all season long, and the idea Hurts having an MVP type year and AJ Brown going to have a big year and all that good stuff. It's like, you're not going to not bet on them in the first game of the season, even though in this case, like, I do like the Packers to do some things this season. This is not a team I like versus a team I quote unquote hate situation. But yeah, for me, this is Eagles -2.5 and as sort of uncomfortable as it is to start with 2 favorites in the first 2 games. The people will know that that's a little unusual for me, but we're not talking about massive favorites here.
Yeah, not talking about big favorites, but we are talking about the NFC East, and I'm going to stay in the NFC East. And the weird thing is to ride with the Eagles and then go to riding with the Dallas Cowboys, who are road underdogs in Cleveland. I know this is weird. Cleveland favored by 2.5 points in this one. This to me is more about the Browns because I'm not sure what to make of the Browns. Deshaun Watson still hasn't really shown that he's better than Joe Flacco in a Browns uniform, which is a weird sentence to say. But if we remember how last year went, a strange season in Cleveland. So I'm not really sure what to make of them. The running backs are banged up, putting even more pressure on Mr. Watson. I don't know what that means necessarily, but I'll say this. The Dallas Cowboys just seem to live in dysfunction, and yet somehow they're still always figuring out a way to be in the mix, to be
to function.
Just doing to function,
Live in dysfunction, but function. Aren't we all?
Yeah. But despite the fact that like Dak still doesn't have a contract, he's still pretty good, right? Like he's still pretty damn good. Anyways, bottom line is I'm on the Cowboys plus 2.5 here. This is a weird one to me, Dallas on the road, but give me the points with Dallas. I'll take all of those points at plus 2.5.
Yeah, interesting market, right? Because Dallas actually opened the favorite way back when. Now, again, this is the different week, right? Where when we say open like next week, we're probably talking about, the previous Sunday night, right? And so we're talking 3 or 4 days. Now we're talking 3 or 4 months because these lines all opened back in May. So back in May, when these lines opened, when the schedule came out and sportsbooks ran to get these lines up, Dallas was a 1.5 point favorite. Based on win totals and stuff, I project Cleveland to be a 1 point favorite. We're now at 2.5, right? So again, third game in, and we're in this 2.5 range, right? Where it's like, all right, do you want to take, what's plus 2.5 going to really get us here? Like, is it going to land 1 or 2? Should we just take the money line? If we like Dallas, Cleveland minus 2.5, like if we just need them to theoretically win, I don't want to mess with any of that, man, because honestly, I don't know what's going on with Dallas. Right, Deron Bland injured, right? So like maybe the defense takes a step back. I'm not a big Zimmer guy. I'm not big on your guy Zim. And the offensive line, is probably one of the worst offensive lines, or at least projected to be one of the worst offensive lines that the Cowboys have had in basically the last like 10 to 15 years. And so I think the offense
brought Zeke back, man.
But yeah, Zeke's back and ready to roll 1 yard in a cloud of dust at a time, which like in Cleveland, like there may be a fair amount of dust in this, that's one of the sort of, I believe it's like one of like 4 grass stadiums left. I don't know. Check me on that one. But here's how I'm going to bet this. I don't know what the hell is going to happen in this game, but I think it's probably going to be close. And what I want to do, Sheldon, again, we're getting back into the groove, the tenets of betting. You know where we're going with this. 6 point teaser leg. 2.5 on the dog is a perfect teaser leg to get this thing up to 8.5. And now you got a 1-score game no matter what happens. And we're cruising. So this is a perfect plus 2.5 teaser leg. We'll talk about it was a new development, I guess. Yeah, we'll talk about a new development that has entered the chat, if you will, for a second teaser leg here in a little bit. But yeah, plus 2.5 up to plus 8.5 in a 2-team. We do 2-team 6-point teasers here. We're looking for the best price available. There's some minus 120 at Bet365. They're getting back into the teaser game, which they used to be a little bit sketchy as far as the pricing is concerned. A lot of places at minus 130. Minus 120 is our target for 2-team 6-point teasers. We're looking to capture key numbers. We're capturing 3. We're capturing 7. We're capturing 8, which has all of a sudden become much more of a key number because of all the going for 2 that transpires in the NFL these days. Dallas plus 8.5 here on the first leg of the teaser is the move to make here for a game that I don't want either side per se, but I think it's going to be pretty close.
No, I totally get it. It just reads like kind of ugly. There's just ugliness. I appear turning on my TV or seeing that game at 4:00 on Sunday. We stick to would be a 1:00 on Sunday. We're going to the good old Buffalo. As the Arizona Cardinals travel to Buffalo as 6.5 point underdogs. And, I'm taking the points here. I'm going to be honest. This is kind of weird for me, but I like taking points. We discussed this, right? Like taking points. And especially once it's up to a touchdown, because it's week one, I feel like I need to introduce some folks who might be new into some of the method to the madness here. And for me to take a team to win by more than a touchdown, I need to be convinced that that team is either really, really good and the other team is really, really bad. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a big gap between the two teams. And I just don't know necessarily what to make for the Bills this season, and same for the Cards, right? And the reason is, if you look at the Cards last year, they had moments where they're super frisky with their new coach and Kyler and not with Kyler. And then they had moments where they were trash. So I'm not really sure what year 2 is going to look like. Plus lots of hype surrounding Marvin Harrison Jr. Like there's just a lot of stuff going on that gives me, there could be some hope in Arizona that they're not completely trash. And so for week 1, give me the points in Buffalo. I'm not afraid of Buffalo yet.
No, and that's fair. Though I am a little bit afraid because we have seen money coming in on the Bills in the last couple of days, right? So I'm looking at DraftKings right now, and they are up to -6.5, -115 on Buffalo. And basically this has been 5.5 or 6 for a long while here. It opened -7, so you could see that people were sort of soured on Buffalo. You saw that with the win total that came down, right? They go and they trade Diggs, and everybody kind of sells the farm here when it comes to Buffalo. It's funny because I still have them from a win total perspective projected at like -8 in this game. So I can see why there would be interest if other people do this the way that I do it. You see 8, you're getting 6, or you're giving 6, and you make that bet, and we'll see what happens. That being said, like I'm with you. I actually am pretty high relative to market on the Cardinals this year. The idea that like when Kyler Murray came back, they were actually pretty functional, speaking of function, and their coach is a defensive, type head coach, right? And so we talked about last week the idea of like, if you have talent on one side of the ball and your head coach is on the other side of the ball, like I can ride with that, right? Because like even if you're not that talented, schematically, you might be able to save yourself a few points. And then the offense, if you have talent there, that might sort of, be, make up for whatever your sort of downfall is. The other thing is these two teams, I think, want to run the football a lot this year, right? And so one of my sneaky bets, if you will, was James Conner to win the rushing title at 50-1 this year, because that guy was tearing it up at the end of last year. He's not flashy. He's not exciting. He's not, a top, first round pick. He's not catching passes the way Bijan Robinson catches passes. He's not Christian McCaffrey, right? But they could and were handing that guy the ball 20 to 30 times in a league that people don't really do that anymore, right? And I don't know how long that's going to last from a career perspective if they do that. But if that's the way they want to go with this, right, the game is going to condense. There are going to be less possessions. And meanwhile, right, part of the deal with like letting Stephon Diggs go and going to sort of more 2 tight end formations and using James Cook, another guy I like in the futures market. Check out the Substack. So I think both of these teams, right, are going to hand the ball off a lot more, than we sort of think of them, right? Because we think of like the Bills as like a high octane, throw it around offense, Josh Allen doing a bunch of stuff, right? And of course, Kyler Murray is like the crown prince of doing a bunch of stuff, right? Pro and con. So I think this is kind of going to be a little bit more of a grimier game, but the way the market is sort of pushing out, this is one where it's going to be tough because, listen, to take people behind the curtain, it is Wednesday right now. This comes out on Thursday. As soon as this hits 7, if it hits 7, if there's even sort of a -120 type price at +7, I think it's going to get bet. I know it's going to get bet by this guy. So I can only kind of assume that 7 isn't going to be a widely available number. So like I can't tell you like change that number to 7, like grade it off of 7, because the number's 6.5 right now. That being said, for people listening, for people watching, like, yeah, this might go to 7 at some point based on the way that it's kind of moving. And it only might do that for like a couple of minutes. So yeah, like +6.5 is definitely the bet, definitely the play. But like be on the lookout for 7 and sort of read the idea of the market sort of drifting away here and liking Buffalo. And, think about some of the advantages that Buffalo normally has, or sort of theoretical advantages with regards to home field. Those don't really apply in September. I don't live that far from Buffalo here in Toronto. it's a beautiful, beautiful day, right? And so, like, this is Kyler Murray weather right now. This is not Josh Allen weather, if you will. So I think the playing field gets leveled because of how much both these teams want to run the ball, the clock gets moving, and because the weather looks to be pretty good on Sunday for Week 1.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be on Buffalo or betting on the Buffalo weather, we're not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, I think it's a good bet there with the Arizona Cardinals. Lots of hope at this point, which, I mean, I guess every team has hope at this point, right? Including the Indianapolis Colts, who open up their season getting their starting quarterback back after he was injured very early on last year. They're hosting the Houston Texans, who everyone seems to love the Houston Texans heading into this season, including this guy, who is on Houston as road favorites here by 3 points. And I stumbled over that because it sounds so strange for me to say the Houston Texans 3-point road favorites. Seems like a lot. I get it. But I like my guy D'Amico. We've always been on board with D'Amico. And they just, I mean, it's one of those things, you said it in one of the previous games we were just talking about. There's a team that you like heading into the season. Why would I not bet them in Week 1? And it's not like I'm going to be afraid of the Colts, but you know, Anthony Richardson is that wild card that I don't really know what's going to happen. Like, who knows? Anthony Richardson could be, you know, have 3 crazy games before he gets injured like he did last year.
Yeah.
So as of now, though, I want to roll with what I know versus the unknown. And what I know is I like the Houston Texans. So I'll lay to 3 points with Houston.
So, yeah,
a lot there, I know.
Yeah, no, there is. And it's another one of these games that, you know, and this is where we're at with, you know, a more sophisticated marketplace. Every year that people get into betting and get smarter about betting and all of that kind of thing, and the more sort of professionals that get in the marketplace and all of that kind of stuff, is the importance of 3. So this is another one that you can take 2.5 minus 118. Again, it's under that sort of, you know, artificial threshold of minus 120, minus 2.5, 118 at DraftKings right now. And so, like, from a grading a grading perspective, this is another one. If you like the favorite, like minus 2.5 should be, you know, it should be graded that way. It is fair to grade it that way. For me, sort of on principle, I'm waiting to see if we can get kind of the Colts +3 at like a flat minus 110. That's where I would enter the market in this game with the Colts. The Colts are one of a handful of teams. I'll put it this way: we're going to close with, assume we're going to close with, or certainly the last game on the board, we're going to close with a team that you want early in the season and you don't want necessarily for a long period during the season. I kind of feel that way about Anthony Richardson. Right? It's 1 year. It's an 0 for 1 because he didn't make it to the end of the season or through the season. But he's healthy right now. And like, that guy's a problem to game plan for. And I have some issues with the Colts defense that I've really only kind of come to that have come to fruition over the last few days, just doing research for articles. But this number is getting out of hand, and a flat 3 would officially be out of hand because I have Houston basically minus a half a point on the road here. The line opened minus 1.5 because there's a lot of interest in Houston this year, right? Like, I'm old enough to remember when you and I were betting on Houston at plus like 10 in these different games, right? Yes. Where we're like, yeah, give me the Texans plus the big time points. Now we're out here on these streets taking them as road favorites. It's like, yeah, I realize it's because of CJ Stroud, but like, I'm going to need them to prove a little bit more to me from a road perspective. You talked about like the concept of hope. Listen, if you play golf on Sunday morning, you're having the most hopeful day a human being can possibly have, because there's no more hopeful group of people than those on the first tee of a golf course, because they're like, today is the day. Today is the day that I go low. Today is the day that something magical happens. It almost never does, but on the first tee, you believe that this might be the day that you shoot the best you've ever shot. Same thing with week 1 in the NFL. This is the year, but half of these teams are going home upset, right? So like, it's a very hopeful day. It can also be a very disappointing day. So this isn't some huge bet that I'm looking to make and like clamoring to be on the Colts, because again, I don't know that I like them all that much from a macro perspective. But with a line that like I has never been all season long 3 points and a flat 3 on either side. If it gets to where I just have to pay minus 110 for the Colts at +3, that's the bet that I'm going to make.
I got you. And this is the difference between week 1 versus the rest of the season, where you get the long sort of road of seeing what's going on with the line, seeing what people are thinking with certain games from week to week, including our next matchup, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars heading to Miami. And the Dolphins are 3.5-point favorites. I'm on Jacksonville here at +3.5. And I'm going to say another key principle here. If I think teams are kind of close to evenly matched and it's at over a field goal, right, most often than not, my initial lean is going to be to take the points. In this instance, we know the Dolphins, they're dealing with a lot of injuries. They're dealing with which sounds like a normal thing to be saying about the Dolphins year in and year out, but here we are again in week 1. But Miami, when they're not healthy, it's just kind of a wild card to me. Also, I think the Jags are just a good, like, I don't know where to place them. Like, I don't know if they're like a good team or if they're like just the okay but spicy team. But either way, you're giving me 3.5 points. Let's do that. And I mean, normally the other thing about this game is it's in Miami, which normally that's a big factor, but you're playing another Florida team. So yeah, I'm good with the Jags here at +3.5.
Yeah, right. If they're playing like Seattle or something like that, like or Minnesota, something along those lines, you're like maybe need to build in an extra point, maybe even 1.5 for home field, right? Off of like 1.5 might be a full 3. I don't feel like that's the case here with the Jags. And we talked about Arizona Buffalo shifting to more of like a run-centric offense. And that might just mean 50-50 this day and age in the NFL, right? I think both these teams don't have any real interest in running the football outside of like maybe in the red zone where it's like Raheem Mostert, maybe some, obviously Devon A-Chain can just break off something at any given time. But like both these teams want to throw the ball, and Jacksonville, I think even more than Miami, from a philosophy standpoint, have just gone like right to like we're throwing the ball. We're Trevor Lawrence. Enough is enough. We're just going to huck this thing around. And I think that there's interest in the over because of that. But for me, there's interest in things like the Jags money line because of that. Because I think there's a high variance possibility for this game, right? Like either team could win by 20, depending on sort of how it goes, turnovers and that sort of thing, right? It's kind of the opposite. The way I see like Dallas and Cleveland, right? Where I just think it's going to be sort of close no matter what. I think this could be sort of wild and crazy, and who knows what happens, right? There could be, like I said, multiple score wins on either side. So I like the Jags here. Again, maybe I'm wrong and it's a close game. And if that's the case, okay, fine. Like we're getting 3.5 points here. Yeah, you might be able to get 4. So just kind of keep in mind there. Also, as the weekend comes in, bunch of recreational money hits the market. And on Sunday, and people start just kind of wailing away. And the volume of bets that come in on a Sunday morning, especially in week 1, guess where those bets are going to be? They're going to be on the Miami Dolphins, right? People like betting on the Miami Dolphins, but like betting on the team like the Colts early on in the season, because like we haven't gotten to the point where guys are injured or whatever. You mentioned the injuries with regards to the Dolphins, and it's it's not October, it's not December, it's not January. These guys are already dealing with honestly the stuff that happened last year still with regards to guys like Chubb being out, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, early on in the season, I'm always aware of like Tyreek Hill pulling up with a hamstring at any given time. So like, yeah, this to me, I feel like is Jags +3.5 or nothing.
Yeah, here's the thing with me there. Totally with you. Totally rocking with or willing to play the Trevor Lawrence game for yet another year and just see another year of his development and where he's at. But either way, that game should be super interesting in Miami. This game will also be super interesting as we head to Tennessee. We head to the Tennessee Titans heading to Chicago. I'm just excited. I'm excited because of the hype train behind the Chicago Bears, who are 4-point favorites at home. And I know that this line seems too high. Like I'm looking at it, I'm like, I get the hype train. I understand all that, but I'm okay with it for week 1. And I will be okay being on this Caleb Williams hype train with the Bears for week 1 at least. And, my only hesitation is 4 seems like a lot. No, but is that just because I don't know enough about the Titans and just how bad they might be?
I don't think the Titans are going to be bad. And so that's the thing, man. Like, I don't see that them being that bad. They're going to be a team that throws it a lot too, which based on new head coach, who's obviously the former Bengals offensive coordinator, right? Like, Jake Browning came in last year for the Bengals, and like Callahan was like, I don't care, man. We're throwing the ball. We are doing that. And obviously they loaded up a little bit with pass receiving options there for Will Levis. So I think they're going to throw the ball around. And again, this is going to be a very similar sort of handicap to Jacksonville, Miami. Except for we don't know as much about either team, but we do know with the offensive philosophy change with Caleb Williams. They didn't draft Caleb Williams to not throw the ball around, right? Yeah. And so I think it's a high variance game, and I think that the possibility is that the Titans win this game in the same way that I think there's a possibility that the Jags win that game, because I don't know what to expect from either side, but I know that ball is going to be getting slung around Soldier Field on Sunday. So obviously the market has liked the Bears. I mean, your first question was like, are the Titans going to be bad? Like, a lot of people think the Bears are going to be really good. Like, their market rating is as an above average team right now. And like, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, sure. Right. But like, I'll put it this way, for the Bears to get to their market rating, they're going to have to prove that this week. Mm-hmm. And the Titans market rating is so low, they almost need to prove that they're that bad, right? When the reality is both teams are probably towards the middle, because this is the NFL, and almost all the teams are pretty close to the middle, where things get crazy. And I mean, think about it this way, from like a survivor pick standpoint, and like plotting out your survive. If you dared to even look ahead to plot your survivor out, which I honestly don't even think is worth doing at this point. Like, what are the teams you want to pick on this year from like a bad perspective? I don't know that the Titans are one of those teams, and they have the fourth lowest regular season win total, I think, right? And like, I would rather pick on the Giants, and the Giants, have essentially the same win total at around 6.5 as the Titans. I think the Broncos could be pretty decent. I mean, depends on the matchup with the Panthers. Like, this is all the bottom echelon of the league. Where teams get bad is when they get into injury trouble, right? When the quarterback goes down, and now you're dealing with, I can fade this guy and this team or whatever down the stretch. Right now, we just don't know. Titans might be average. The Bears might be average. And if that's the case, then this line should be a lot lower. But the feeling is, the assumption is that the Bears are going to be above average, and I need to see that first. And I think the Titans have a very real possibility, very real chance of being average, which is a compliment to the Titans, given the fact that everybody just looks at the Titans. They're kind of one of those teams, obviously an AFC South team that when you're not great, you're not all that flashy, people don't think all that much of you. But like, I think there's a possibility they win a lot of games. And I say a lot of games, I mean more games than the 6.5 that they're prescribed in the betting market. I have over 6.5 for the Titans this year. So I like the Titans here plus the points, and I think there's a chance they actually win this game. Oh, baby, we've got the first switch of the season.
The first one of the season. And for people, you're listening to cues and how the intros go into these games. When I start something by saying, I know this line is too high, that's me begging to be convinced to switch this pick, right? But the reason being too is because all the things are right there. Obviously, like, I didn't do this on purpose, but where this game was laid right behind the Jags and Dolphins, and you're just talking about, the reminder of points being super valuable, and it's week 1 and what we don't really know, right? And focusing in on what we know versus what we don't know. This is an easy switch for me to take the Tennessee Titans at +4. And hey, first one, we're here. It took what is this, 6 games in midway through, but that's all right. That's what we do here. Sometimes it happens where the picks get flipped. Let's see what we're going to do here, because this is another game where we got the Atlanta Falcons, who are at home. Lots to talk about the Atlanta Falcons and their whole division this season and what a mess that is going to be. But in week 1, they're at home hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Falcons 3.5 point favorites. And this is a weird one because it's kind of like the Bears game where I'm just like, wait, taking the Bears -4, taking the Falcons -3.5. Like, it sounds strange, but taking them by more than a field goal against anybody, I understand that. And much like we were just talking about the Titans, again, I did not list these games in order at all, in any particular order, but much like what you just said about the Steelers or about the Titans, can kind of say about the Steelers as well, because it's like, yeah, everyone's saying they're supposed to be bad, but like I haven't seen a Mike Tomlin team be like terrible, or at least that bad that I can just write them off in week 1 against Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. Either way, it's more than a field goal. I'm not even going to make it that difficult. Sorry I rambled this long, but Pittsburgh plus 3.5.
No, that's fair. And you're coming in at the right time because it has just got to 3.5 basically in the last day or so, right? And this line opened 3, and I bet Pittsburgh, this is back in May, I bet Pittsburgh plus 3 at the time. Because I was like, all right, Atlanta, first of all, we're drafting Michael Penix here, so technically they're not getting better from a talent perspective with their first round pick. Like, it might be a good pick, might be a bad pick. It's neither here nor there. But the point is, week 1 with Kirk Cousins in the fold, the Falcons did not improve their talent for this specific game. So I was like, okay, let's take the Steelers. By the way, also, not thrilled with the talent on defense at the time. Well, like, what's happened since then? We talked last week about the Steelers and just like the offense looking grim in the preseason. Again, it's the preseason, but it's supposed to look a little bit better than that with such vanilla defenses that you're going up against from a schematic standpoint. And the Falcons go and they add Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons. And I'm just like, okay, the defensive talent has gotten a lot better. And then, by the way, like, one of the ideas was maybe Kirk Cousins doesn't make it back in time for that week 1 game. And we don't know if Michael Penix is going to be any good. Well, in the preseason, he shows in 1 game that he's good. And to the point where the coaching staff was like, yeah, we don't need to see any more of him in a real game. So, like, even if Cousins, something happens in the next day or so and he's not able to play, or, God forbid something happens in the first quarter of the game, the Falcons are probably still okay. So that's why you see the market liking Atlanta in this game and getting to 3.5. So where you can take the plus 3 with the Steelers. So, point is I'm sort of sitting here with just a bet. It's not a big bet, nothing crazy. It's just one singular solitary bet on what is a bad number and how we sort of, what the thought process was into making that bet and how it's gone awry basically since it happened. Area where like Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are in my life. Right. And particularly Russell Wilson this week. So I can't really.
You like Russell over Justin Fields here?
No, I'm saying he's the starter this week. Right. And so I much rather see Justin Fields play. But, again, it's not like he was lighting up the preseason. If he had done basically anything in the preseason, he would be the starting quarterback, and I would feel a little bit better about this bet that I made months ago. So, yeah, I can't tell you that I love where I'm at here. My like for the Falcons stems on the idea that I think they run the NFC South. I think they go 5-1 against the NFC South this season. I think they win that division handily. If it goes really well for the Falcons, I like them at the number of plus 850 to maybe get the 1 seed in the NFC. Because if you're getting 5 to 6 free wins in that division, you're getting a head start essentially on the Lions, who have a tough division, and on the Eagles, who again, as much as we think highly of them, who knows what might necessarily happen in Philadelphia. So I like the Falcons sort of conceptually. I like the Falcons within the context of the division, but laying 3.5 points with the Falcons is not something I'm looking to do.
Fair enough. I totally get it. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on laying 3 points with the new and improved Chargers, or at least the Harbaugh Chargers.
Yeah.
The Raiders are in LA to take on the Chargers. Chargers laying 3 points as mentioned. I'm laying the 3 points with said Chargers because I'm a Harbaugh believer, bringing in a culture and a foundation. And most importantly, remembering the fact that the last time these two teams met, the Raiders laid the smackdown on the Chargers.
Right.
And your man's Easton Stick.
Yeah.
But I mean, what an embarrassment that was. And I mean, I would hope that gets brought up. I'm going to assume that gets brought up. But overall, I just think removing the stench of Brendan Staley and replacing that with Harbaugh, that's got to be worth something to Justin Fields. Wow. Justin Herbert, pardon me.
Yeah.
But the point remains, it's 3 points. It's kind of a lot, but this is a purely, I believe in Harbaugh having these guys ready for week 1 against the Raiders.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the only That's kind of the only angle I can find. You know what I mean? Like, so I'll put it this way, right? I have the line at -4, and it's a good example of the game where I should mention, like, it opened Chargers -3. Justin Herbert had the camp injury, and the line came down, and then it came back up because everybody's like, yeah, he's going to be fine for game one, and now we're pretty comfortably at 3 for this game. And anytime it's sort of even looked to go to 3.5 potentially, it's also come back down to 3. So the thing is, you can project out a line. If I was an odds maker, at a sports book, and I projected out a line to be -4, especially with the fact that the Chargers basically have no home field advantage, I am giving them a point of home field advantage with that -4 number. So, I give them a point, so they go to -4. If you tell me they have no home field advantage, they go to -3. If you tell me that there are so many Raiders fans, 50,000 of them probably in this game, where the Raiders actually have a home field advantage, then I probably get you under 3, right? So, like, again, the point is like, that's a lot of kind of nebulous theory there to try to find a bet in this game where I don't love the Chargers talent. We talked about that. But I don't love the Raiders talent either. So, I don't really want anything to do with this game or have anything significant on this game. And in a purest example of you can find something to watch for in any NFL game, find something to cheer for from a betting perspective, I've got 2 things. One is the Raiders offense to be bad. I bet on that this season for one of the lowest scoring teams, or the lowest scoring team in the league, at plus 900, I think it was. And then the other thing was, I'm going to be cheering for J.K. Dobbins to play, to run, and to not get hurt, because my guy at 40-1 is my comeback player of the year. You got a lot of quarterbacks this year, right, who have come back from injuries. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers is the favorite for comeback player of the year. But if he gets hurt again, that's not going to be much of a comeback. And you have all these guys in similar situations, right? Your Joe Burrows, your Anthony Richardsons, right? All these injury comebacks for quarterbacks. Running back comeback injury, that's a different thing. And that kind of, obviously brings a different story, if you will, to the table. And it's not just one injury. These guys had like 5 surgeries on his right leg, and it looks like he's going to play. He's going to get his share, and he's only 25, and obviously thought highly of, years and years and years ago. So we'll see. In a crowded but mediocre backfield, maybe J.K. Dobbins has a nice resurgence, maybe even sort of that barely do 1,000-yard type season. But something that gets people's attention, because you're like, you know what, really great to see J.K. Dobbins back and doing stuff. And when you start hearing that on the broadcast, now you're looking at a comeback player of the year, and at 40-1, why not, right?
Why not, indeed, which is kind of my thought process heading into our next game, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Washington Commanders. And this is why not make a bet on this game? That's how I'm looking at this. The Bucs are favored by 3.5 points in this game, and that's just too many points for me. But also, I'm excited to watch Jaden Daniels, right? Like, let's be honest here. The Washington Commanders haven't given us much over the last few years at all. And the hype machine isn't quite as much as Caleb Williams, obviously, but there's still a lot of hype there, as it's a sign of hope. And if you're telling me I can get 3.5 points here and it's the Bucs, I'm going to take that. 2 not so good teams, or 2 just okay teams. Yeah, you can talk me into taking the points again over a field goal. Those are just some of the principles you'll hear repeated throughout the year on this pod. So yeah, give me the Commanders plus 3.5 in this one.
We went from probably the game I like least from a betting perspective to the game I like most. LUV. Love the Commanders in this game, plus 3.5. Line open 4. Thought that was a little high. My projections were minus 3.4. That is obviously based on the market and the win totals and all of that good stuff, right? But that's also, the premise of that is that the Commanders play the Eagles, the Cowboys, and all these sort of better teams. And the Buccaneers aren't that. We talked about it last week, right? This is a team that's been 17-17 the last 2 years while winning their division. So you can be like, oh, back-to-back division winners, playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. They won a playoff game last year and all that stuff. I don't think they're any good. I think they're just a mediocre team. And we're talking about a mediocre team and a team that has some excitement, at least to start the season. Again, they're on the first tee box at the golf course right now. The Commanders are. This could be, this could be great. This could be the thing. RG3 all over again, at least that rookie season. All the hope, right? All the excitement. At more than a field goal, even if I think it's a fair line, technically, I'm higher on the Commanders relative to the market, and I'm lower on the Buccaneers relative to the market. It is an easy bet to make. Do I necessarily think it's going to win? I mean, obviously, I think it's going to win. Is it easy to win? Of course not. I'm going to be sweating through for 60 minutes like I'm standing on the sidelines in Tampa Bay in that Florida humidity, right? It's probably going to get delayed with some sort of heinous storm that comes rolling through. And, 1 o'clock start, or no, it's a 4:30 start, I think, 4 o'clock start. That game might end at 9 p.m. for all we know, right? Like, who knows? Florida in September. It's going to be mayhem. It's going to be painful, probably. But honestly, from a numbers perspective, from a handicapping perspective, I love the Commanders plus 3.5. And you know what? Maybe a famous last word situation, but I do.
I'm right there with you. If we're going down together with the Washington Commanders at plus 3.5 in the first game of the season. This is a big boy spread here as our next game, the New England Patriots traveling to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Bengals 8.5 point favorites. As not only as a Jamar Chase fantasy keeper league owner, am I just like, what is happening here? But also just from a betting perspective, like, what's going on here? Anyways. Yeah. A lot of weird storylines with the Bengals this offseason, but I feel like with the uncertainty, the perfect team to start off against might be this Patriots team, which has not a lot of expectations, not a lot of anything really going on as they're starting Jacoby Brissett this season, which is kind of an indicator of, we'll throw you out in front of that O-line and just hope that you'll survive, I guess. Mm-hmm. Anyways. Yeah. Not a lot of talent on the Patriots. I don't like laying 8.5 points, but if I am going to do that, it's because I believe the one team is really, really bad, and I think the other team can be really, really good. So here we are, Cincinnati Bengals, laying 8.5.
Well, I got news for you, bud. I'm checking out DraftKings right now, and it's down to 7.5. So let's get the control room on that right now. Pew. And I don't understand the line move, but I kind of understand the line move, if you catch my drift here. I don't understand it because honestly, based on, and listen, I've quoted you a bunch of numbers and projection and all that sort of thing, right? And they were all pretty close to the line. I think fair to say. It was not like there was a 3-point line where I was like, I've got this at 6 or like something crazy like that. I got the Bengals here minus 12 in this game. And the reason is obviously, because of the market element, right? Where the Bengals are 10.5 win total team, which is basically like 4th or 5th in the league. We talked about the idea that they're now like basically co-favorites in some places with the Ravens for the AFC North. And the Patriots have a win total of 4.5. Dead last in the entire league, right? And so think about any week in any season, right? One of the best teams in the league hosts the worst team in the league or the perceived worst team in the league. What's the point spread going to be, right? We're going to see a ton of 10s, 11s, 12s. We might even get up to 13s or 14s. We might even get up, higher than that if there's sort of quarterback issues. And yet this number, which opened 7.5 and way back in May had me shaking my head that seemed really low, got to 9. And so I was like, okay, now we're cooking, guys. Like we're on this sort of thing. I don't know, might have even got to 9.5 at some point. I don't think it ever got to 10. But now, as you mentioned, right, it goes to 8.5. And then just now, essentially today has, kind of fallen down to 7.5. I was really just looking for this to get to that 8.5 number that you mentioned. Why? Teaser leg part 2, everybody. Ding, 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 ding. This is the one that has developed into a teaser leg here because you're pulling this number now down from 8.5 to 7.5, but you're getting it down to minus 1.5, right? So you're capturing 7, you're capturing 3, those key numbers, and like hopefully the Bengals don't win just by 1. Hopefully they win by 2, so that the 1.5 doesn't matter. But yeah, this is for me a teaser leg. And you're saying, like, why not take the minus 7.5 if you think 12 is the number? I think, obviously, part of the win total thing for the Patriots and their rating from a season-long perspective is the idea that eventually they're going to go to Drake May and he's probably going to have rookie struggles because he doesn't have a ton of talent around him, and the offensive line is frankly probably going to be doo-doo, and they're going to lose a lot of games, and that win total is going to make a lot of sense by the end of the season. But with a veteran quarterback who can get the ball out and who can find receivers in short gains at a time, and maybe even test the downfield secondary of the Bengals in Jacoby Brissett, he's more likely to keep them in games on a week-to-week basis. And so if that's sort of the handicap, you're not going to, have a 12-point spread, a 10-point spread, and apparently even a 9 or an 8.5-point spread since we're down to 7.5. So I can sort of understand the idea that, okay, the Patriots could keep this game a little bit closer. What I kind of like in this game is actually the over, because again, I think the Patriots offense, put it this way, rookie Drake May, Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones, veteran Jacoby Brissett. Who would you want starting tomorrow if you were any team, right? And we're not talking about developing for the future. We're just trying to win a football game. The answer is Jacoby Brissett, right? He is the best quarterback of those four right this second, right? When we get into the actual shots fired, heat of battle, all that good stuff. So the Patriots offense is probably at least going to just be better than last year from that perspective. The offensive line wasn't good last year. The skill position players weren't good last year. Your guy Zeke was having big games on Thursday nights against the Steelers. So maybe the Patriots offense is actually a little bit better. But where I obviously have a lot more concern for the Patriots is defensively. They literally lost the best defensive coach by reputation in the history of the game, or at least the modern game, in Bill Belichick. It can't get better from that perspective. We talked about Judon being moved, right? Christian Barmore out for the season with the blood clotting issues, right? These are pretty significant guys on the teams that the Patriots actually had really good defenses on. So Cincinnati, right? Joe Burrow back. They're going to sling it around, all of that good stuff. The number's 40.5 at DraftKings right now.
Ooh.
I think the Bengals could blow them out. And if they don't blow them out, it's because Jacoby Brissett was able to move the ball down the field and get a few points, your 14 to 17 points in this game. So I have this game sort of that 27 to 17, 30 to 17 type range. Maybe it gets a little bit closer, and that's why the point spread is what it is. But not only do I have the Cincinnati Bengals here in a tease, they're also the survivor pick this week. And it's not rocket science. It's the longest. It's the highest spread of any of them. I want to get Cincinnati used and done as fast as I can because, again, you never know with Joe Burrow and all of that stuff. And their schedule isn't particularly great as far as home games and who has to come to Cincinnati. This is probably the biggest favorite that they're going to be all season long. So don't worry about I want to zag while everybody's zigging with the Bengals. It's week one, man. It's going to be a long season. There's going to be a lot of weird stuff happening in Survivor. And honestly, if the Patriots walk into Cincinnati and win this game, a lot of people are going down, and you can sort of sleep at night, even if you got knocked out in week one. Whereas any other option, I really look at it and I go, if you got knocked out by taking that team against that team, you probably don't sleep for a very long time.
No, totally understand. And our next game is definitely not a game in which anyone will be using in Survivor, as you have the Minnesota Vikings heading to New York to take on the Giants. And Minnesota road favorites here. Road favorites at -2. And I'm actually on Minnesota as road favorites -2 because Brian Daboll is now calling the plays again for the Giants. Is that a thing that I've seen? Anyways, I say this to say the Giants are just a mess. And I guess you would have to be to not even be favored at home versus a Vikings team that is not projected to be that great. But yet here we are. I would want to take the points here, just because it's a home dog
in theory,
two not so good teams, but I just can't bet on the Giants. Just can't do it. Can't do it. Won't do it.
And here I come in, superhero again, telling you there's a better number, man. There's -1.5 at DraftKings. There's even, put it this way, there's some pretty cheap money lines on Minnesota, right? So if you're going to bet this game, go find a -118, -120 money line and take all the points out of the equation, because this is what we kind of talked about towards the start of the podcast, right? Team I like relative to market versus team I don't like relative to market. And that's team I like, Minnesota, because I think they're getting sort of discounted because of Sam Darnold. And the Giants, I don't know if they're getting discounted necessarily, but if they have the 5th lowest win total, and I think they might be the worst team in the league to the point where I bet that at 11-1, then I'm lower even than the market is on the Giants, right? So this is, again, easy bet to make. Obviously, a couple of guys out from a skill position. TJ Hawkinson not going to be back for a little while, and Jordan Addison doesn't look like he's going to play. But you know what? If you still have Justin Jefferson on your team, like I'm still pretty cool with backing you, and I think Aaron Jones is going to be a nice fit, kind of opposite towards the the Derrick Henry fit with Baltimore. And again, like Aaron Jones, banged up a lot last year, guy who's played a lot more games over his career and been healthier over his career than sort of I think maybe a lot of people give him credit for, and they think that he might be washed, and I just don't agree with that. So I think the Vikings offense is going to be pretty good, and when we're talking about Daniel Jones and the idea of Daniel Jones getting confused by a defense and having a bad offensive line in front of him, your guy Brian Flores is coming in hot for some Daniel Jones, havoc. So I like the Vikings here. Again, summer conditions, like not that New York has a particularly good home field advantage for either team, which is sort of a weird thing to say about New York because they have such a good home field or home ice advantage in other places. But yeah, like I like Minnesota to win this game. So just grab the money line at like a -120, and I think you're good to go.
I like it. And I also like the term liking a team relative to market being the in quotations part that is so important when people are listening to us discuss certain teams and who you like and who you don't like and all that fun stuff.
Especially week one, because we spent 3 months looking at these teams, right? So the market's had a chance to weigh in and have their opinion and rate these teams as they do. And like we've also put all these bets into play that are relative to market. So it's like, why wouldn't I just register that opinion in week one in a lot of cases, right? And unfortunately, there's a lot of teams that match up that I like relative to market on both sides, and that's kind of a bummer. And I think we're going to catch up to one here pretty soon.
Yeah, and here's one as we move on to our next game here. The Panthers at the Saints. Saints are 4-point favorites at home, and the Saints aren't a team that I want to lay more than a field goal with. They're just not. Also, there's a sign of let's see what can happen here with Bryce in season 2. Will there be some level of progression, some level of just anything there where you saw some flashes? There were some moments, whereas I feel like I know where we're at with Derek Carr. I'm good. I'm good on Derek Carr.
We definitely do.
Give me the +4 here with the Panthers. I'm not really going to add much more to this game, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think that like the Saints are the one of the teams where in week one, it's like, I know what I'm going to get, and it's going to like probably watching them just going to bum me out. And I think New Orleans feels the same way about Derek Carr. It seems short. I know a lot of people like New Orleans because of how short the line, is in this game. It has, it's funny, like we've definitely hit the over on amount of time before you use the term Vegas zone for a point spread. So
I know, right?
You're like, well, oh man, I'm not even in mid-season form vis-a-vis the Vegas zone. But yeah, this is that like, the old Bill Simmons term, right? Like the line between, sort of 3.5 and 6 is because, it's kind of a shoulder shrugger, right? So this line opened 4.5. My projection was 4.5. But if you think I have a problem with the idea that Carolina is a little bit shorter than 4.5, you'd be sadly mistaken. Because again, I don't want anything to do. We're going to be able to count on one hand, probably on 0 hands, how many times I'm going to be interested in the Saints as a home favorite or as a favorite of any kind, especially of higher than 3 points this season. And this is certainly not one of those times, right? And so I was almost appalled to find out that the Panthers actually had a pretty good defense from a yards per game perspective last year. Obviously, some game script had something to do with that. But if you look back, especially some of these NFC South games like this is, their games got pretty grimy, a lot of like in the teens type of games, right? So while they weren't great from a points per game perspective, the yardage per game was actually pretty good. And so I think if the defense continues to be good, and the offense takes a step forward, and what we talk about, right? New coach, new offensive sort of plan here for Bryce Young. And Bryce Young isn't, we use the example of like a Mitch Trubisky, right? Who plays 10 games and then gets drafted really high. Like Bryce Young played a lot of football at Alabama, right? Like, so like there's more sort of leeway for the concept of like him being good. From a bigger picture perspective, I do worry, obviously, about a talent discrepancy here for the Panthers on a, from a season-long perspective, because again, they gave up a lot for Bryce Young, and they don't have a lot to sort of show for that until he starts playing like the first overall pick that everybody would hope, would turn into something. So that's going to be a bummer for them this season, maybe next season, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know that bothers them this game, right? Because again, I don't think that much of Dennis Allen nor Derek Carr. And listen, I'm not the only one certainly in that department. So yeah, I like the dog here with Carolina, maybe even outright, but we'll see.
Yeah, talking about liking Bryce in year 2. What about Sean Payton in year 2 as his Denver Broncos are heading to Seattle to open up their new NFL season? The Seahawks 6-point favorites at home. Seahawks are another team. We said it earlier. If you really like a team, take them in week 1. The 6 points is a lot to lay here, but Seahawks at home, a team with a real home field advantage. Really interested to see what Bo Nix has in store with the Sean Payton duo. And I'm interested to see that, but I'm going to lay the 6 points here and not really like it, but I'm going to lay the 6 points.
Yeah, I talked about the idea of it's really easy to make a bet because you like one team, you don't like another team relative to market. In some cases, you hate both teams, like Chargers and Raiders, for example. This is that other side. This is where it's easy for me to not play this game because I like Denver relative to market and I like Seattle relative to market. And it bums me out that they're not each playing a different team. And I don't know how this game is going to go, but I'd probably be more interested in betting both of these teams next week, right? Especially if Denver gets, at the point where Denver gets a home field early on in the season in the rare air mile high. So I'm going to pass on this game because, again, from a numbers perspective, I have it minus 5.8. I think that's the right number. The opening line back in May was Seattle minus 4.5. And so that interest in Seattle that I think a lot of people have, a lot of sort of sharper bettors have, I think that has been registered and why we've gotten from 4.5 to 5.5 to 6. So it's like the market's weighed in already on Seattle. And this is probably as high as I think this point spread is going to go. And, you can talk me a lot into the idea that, Sean Payton is going to have a nice season in year 2. I think that. And that might manifest itself in game 1 in keeping this game close. And so I could see why people would like the Broncos plus 6 as this line has crept up. So for me, this is largely just kind of a stay away because, again, it's kind of like, it'd be an exaggeration to say that this is my children fighting in the backyard, but these are two teams that I, have regard for, or at least hope to have regard for this season. And it sucks because honestly, when you have these sort of opinions that have been built up over the course of the summertime and doing all the research, you want to fire in week 1, right? Because it's not going to take long for the market to adjust these days, right? People figure this stuff out, that Seattle's good or Denver's better than people think and all that kind of thing. And so it's a bummer that you don't get an opportunity to bet on these teams. We're going from 2 possible bets here to 0. And that's a real bummer. So, seeing this on the schedule really was kind of a drag.
Yeah, tough one for sure. And I also think our Sunday nighter is a very tough game, tough matchup as well, as we got the Los Angeles Rams in Detroit in a rematch of last year's playoff matchup as well. The Detroit Lions are 4-point favorites at home. That was a really close game, or ended up being a super close game last year, even though that Detroit came out gunning. And I think Detroit is another team that a lot of people are on heavy this year. This is just, honestly, I'm leaning on the 4 points. It's more than a field goal. I think it'll be a close game because they'll play close, and that's why I'm on the points with the Rams. I still think the Rams are going to be a solid team. Matthew Stafford is healthy, which I like them when Matthew Stafford is healthy, but there's still some question marks there with their defense. So interesting one here. My lean is to take the points, but what say you?
Well, I got 2 problems with this, my friend. And listen, I think as we've talked about, I've earned the sort of cachet or sort of the credibility to say this. The line's not 4, line's 3.5. If you like the Rams, 3.5 is the number. And my bigger bone to pick with this is I love Detroit in this game. I love them. Love them almost as much as I love. This is my favorite of the week. If the Commanders are my favorite underdog, this is my favorite at Lions minus 3.5. Pretty simple, honestly. It's the Rams without Aaron Donald and the defensive adjustment that they're going to have to make, and everybody going to have to start pulling their weight in a way that they have not had to do for the Rams, and it's a young group. It's a very inexpensive group. I think it's the cheapest defense from a salary cap perspective in the NFL because it's loaded with rookies and second-year players. Right? They had two really good rookies last year, and they have two more coming in, both from Florida State. And you've seen, for those college football fans out there, what's happened to Florida State's defense with those two guys being drafted. That being said, it's like, well, now we're talking about, not having to double team and triple team somebody in the middle. And while those guys may develop and play nicely together down the line here, the first game of the year, we talked first game about the Ravens and Zach Orr being like, imagine your first game is having to deal with, Patrick Mahomes. Imagine your first game without Aaron Donald is having to deal with the Detroit Lions offensive line. Right, which is arguably the best in the league and returns pretty much everybody from last year. So I think Detroit scores almost at will, and I think the offense for the Rams takes a bit of a step back this season. Right, it was one thing where it's like Puka Nacua, who is that guy? all of that stuff, and obviously Detroit went out of their way to improve the defense as well, adding Carlton Davis, going through the draft to get some more secondary help. So I think the defense goes up for the Lions. The offense stays good because they retained Ben Johnson, and I think the defense goes down for the Rams. And that combination, this line was about the same as it was for that playoff game last year, and the Rams covered that game. So like maybe in the back of your mind, you or the people who are watching and listening are going like, well, I like the Rams plus the points in a game that was close last year. I think this is a little bit different. You don't have that like pressure of the playoffs and whatever. Like I think the Lions play nice and loose. Like I said, all hands on deck. Better matchup than it was for them last year. For me, this is Rams, and I think, this is Lions. This is Lions pretty big over the Rams, and I'm not afraid about the -3.5. And think about all the other games, right, that have been -2.5, -3. Like, oh, we can't decide. This has basically never been -3 all offseason. And just the fact that like you haven't seen that money come in on the Rams to take it down to -3, even for like a few days, I don't think. At least I haven't seen that. I think that's telling, and I think we sort of talk tongue in cheek about the idea of sort of sports books trying to coax bets in. I think they're trying to coax a bet in on the Rams here. I think the Lions handled them pretty easily, and we're changing it again. We did it. That was a convincing argument I made. Yes. Are you on mute, my man? Check it. I can't hear you.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Well, See, I was so fired up. All the control room, changing keys, changing graphics, and muting my mics. Right. What's going on here? Bottom line, though, the second flip, there are sound effects going off too. I bet the sound effects didn't come through. I'll do it again. Anyway, that means the pick has been changed.
I thought it was a hold up. I thought it was a hold up, let him cook situation where you're just like, Russell's going, man. Let me just hit mute and get out. Like, let me get out the way here.
The second pick has been changed of the pod. We are now on the Detroit Lions laying the 3.5 points on Sunday Night Football, which will be heading into a Monday Night Football game that I am very excited for, because it involves my San Francisco 49ers, but also I'm very excited for it because it involves one of the bigger talking points of the entire NFL season, the New York Jets. Now, Niners are at home, favored by 4.5 points. I'm going to start here by saying I am laying the 4.5 points. And one of the reasons why I'm laying the 4.5 points is because I feel like this is just the machine of talking yourselves into the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, and they're going to make the Super Bowl, and they're going to be this, and they're going to be that, and all of these things that I have yet to see the Jets actually ever do in my time of watching. Well, I can't say ever, because they did make some championship games. Like, you get the point of what I'm saying, though, right? The hype machine never really adds up. We've seen more superstars go to die in New York Jets uniforms than we've seen them actually live up to the expectations in New York Jets uniforms. And I'm just not ready to quit on the Niners so far. Not ready to quit on them yet. I understand that everyone's lining up ready to give the division away. I even said I'm nervous about this season, but that doesn't start now against the Jets and Aaron Rodgers on Monday Night Football. As you mentioned, Big Trent is back. Brandon Ayuk is back. Let's go. Give me the Niners. I'll lay the 4.5 points.
Okay, bit of a turn of events from last week's podcast where my guy, like you said, was a little bit worried. Again, hopeful, right? Again, you're me on the first tee. This is the year, this is the round, this is the hole. Like we're going low. Okay, so I agree with you, big picture, right, on the Jets and that sort of concept of, they're not going to win the Super Bowl. They're not going to, I don't even really think they're going to win the division, right? I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to stay healthy for a full season. We've talked about this. None of those sort of negative opinions about the Jets apply to the first game of the season. You know what I mean? He is healthy right now. He only has to play 60 minutes or, whatever, however much they're on the field. He doesn't have to play 17 games on Monday night. Do you know what I mean? He
doesn't have to run out with the flag either, which,
clearly
keep that was an issue for him last year.
Keep that man away from all flags or not. I mean, honestly, I don't care. But so the line opens -5.5, again, way back when. All of the offseason dramatics with the 49ers knocks this thing down to 3.5 as of like a week ago. Those guys all come back and it goes to 4.5. But all of this whole movement is all in that nebulous Vegas zone that we talked about before, right? Where it's like probably doesn't necessarily matter, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. My concern here for the 49ers is that this isn't the game that the Chiefs are getting up for on Thursday night. Right. This feels like the game last year that the Chiefs had, right? A non-conference game. We've had guys holding out. Trent Williams might not be in peak condition, for example. We got a couple of injuries we got a guy who got shot last week. So we might have some perspective that maybe this isn't the most important thing we got going on. Brandon Ayuk admitted when reports came out that it was the exact same deal that he was offered 3 weeks ago, he admitted, he's I made this harder than it needed to be. Guy just didn't really feel like it, I guess, and it's just are the vibes where they need to be again, especially from an offensive line going up against the defense that as much as the hopes, if you will, long-term big picture, rely on Aaron Rodgers, the proven stuff for the Jets is your Quinnen Williams, your Quincy Williams, your CJ Mosley, your Sauce Gardners. You know what I mean? The defense is the proven thing.
Stuff.
They got some stuff. And they have good vibes. I think those good vibes go by the wayside at some point between now and January. But for week one, I think that taking the points here at +4.5, now that we've kind of gotten up to this level, and honestly maybe waiting to see if it gets back to that 5.5 as we get closer to Monday, maybe that ends up being sort of the play from a value perspective, because I haven't made this bet just yet. My point is I have to kind of push aside my distaste for the Jets from a macro perspective and understand that none of the stuff that I think is going to go wrong applies necessarily to this game. Could he get injured in the first game? Of course he could. We've seen it before. But my point is that's not really why we don't like the Jets the way that the market likes the Jets. So I think they're overrated from a win total perspective, from an odds, Super Bowl odds, all of that. And that goes into this line, but that team is going to be on the field on Monday. And so getting points, I'm fine with, and I would much prefer to take that versus a team that's kind of gone through the motions this preseason and offseason.
For sure. And I will say that I am buying stock in the Josh Dobbs Niners starting quarterback. I'm buying stocks there. I'm just letting you know I'm buying low right now.
You want some Josh Dobbs in your life, which I can't if it happens,
I'm just saying I'm buying some stocks. I'm buying some futures. That's all I'm saying.
Know.
I'm not saying that I'm wishing ill will.
No, but if you're buying, you want those to pay off.
I'm just saying. I'm buying low
for some reason.
I'm buying low. Anyways, we've reached the end of week one. We're back. We're fired up for the NFL season. And of course, if you enjoyed everything that you heard here, which of course you did, because why else would you be listening?
How couldn't you?
Where else can the people get more from you, my dude?
Yeah, man, the great content delivery experiment of 2024, 2025. The Substack is emrus.substack.com. And everything that we've talked about here sort of gets reflected, among other things, right? We have a loaded roster of futures and team totals and award bets and stuff over there. It's called The Window, so you can just type in The Window into Substack, and that'll fire right up. And of course, you can follow me at mrussauthentic on Twitter. And listen, you're not going to miss all of the stuff that I'm writing over at the Substack. I tweet that out every single article that I write. So swing by there. It's 100% free for the year. And here's hoping to a great NFL season.
Yeah, NFL season is going to be a whole lot of fun, and we are here. You can follow me on Twitter at Sheldon Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And of course, this pod, we have the Picks Pod coming to you each and every Thursday, where we'll be breaking down each and every game. You can find the podcast on YouTube, on Apple, and on Spotify. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate, review, follow, all that other fun stuff, because that's how you support the pod. That is the movement here on the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast. Yeah, got it. Good. See, I tied myself into a tongue twister here, but you know what? It's week 1. We're fired up. I'm excited. I got to go. I got to run, but I really did used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is a Clutch Picks Sports Betting Podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.